Hey, it's Netta, and I'm so excited to tell you that I've made a brand new quiz just for you called the Cravings Quiz. It's a quick 10-question quiz that I designed to get you thinking more deeply about your cravings, because the first step to feeling more in control around food, especially sugar, is to be aware of how cravings affect you. And whereas most quizzes give you generic feedback, I'm offering to give you specific, personalized feedback and practical tips to help you turn theory into action. So go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to do the quiz today and to take the first step so that you can get rid of cravings. Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and this is part 2 of my chat with Dr. Steven Gundry, best-selling author, and with a new book out in April 2025 called The Gut-Brain Paradox. And last episode was the first part of our chat together where we talked about gut health. And in this second part, we're still talking about gut health, but more specifically about which foods you can add to your diet to make sure that you're feeding your gut health and not your cravings. We'll get to the second part of our chat in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at MyLifeAfterSugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_LifeAfterSugar. So gut health is now finally, after Hippocrates, we had a little break there in medical knowledge, 2,500 years, now we're like, well, hang on, maybe gut health really is that important. What can the regular consumer/patient do to improve their gut health?
Well, I'll tell you a fascinating story. I wasn't smart enough back then to really grasp how important it was. When I mentioned I was senior registrar at Great Ormond Street in London and operated babies, heart surgery. And in the hospital, the sisters, the nurses, would send the mothers out to the local store and have them buy yogurt. And they'd come back and they'd be feeding the babies this yogurt. And there were 2 of us Americans and another Brit, and the Americans were kind of chuckling, saying, oh, what a cute custom. And it's like, why? That's silly. Why are you doing that? And they say, well, Mr. Gundry, surgeons are Mr. in England, Mr. Gundry, you've killed off all of this child's bacteria with your antibiotics, and we're putting them back. And you're going, it's so sweet and quaint. Well, the sisters were right. The nurses were right. And, this was back in 1985. And I've written about little did I know, I should have really, of course they're right. And of course I killed them all off. I didn't plan to, but here, they getting yogurt. So you're right. One of the things that I've stressed in the last few books, like Gut Check and the Gut Brain Paradox, is we have to not only get these bacteria back in us, but we have to give them what they need to eat. And it's even more than that. We now know that there are a third classification. So probiotics are friendly bacteria. Prebiotics are the fiber that friendly bacteria want to eat. But postbiotics, which are the products of fermentation, it turns out are the necessary pieces to allow friendly bacteria to use prebiotics to make the stuff that we need. So you mentioned, I think off camera, that fermented foods are really one of the big missing links. And we shouldn't be surprised because not so long ago, the only way you could preserve a food was actually fermentation. That was it, to keep it from going bad. And interestingly enough, initially, all of our grain products were fermented. Um, Bread was, you rose bread by fermentation, and almost all bread now is not fermented, and so on and so forth. I point out that the Incas used quinoa, but people don't realize the Incas did not eat just cooked quinoa. They actually let it rot, they fermented it, and then they cooked it. And it's not on the package directions.
Mm.
So, so we've just lost touch with what all these cultures have always done.
Yeah. And when we say we, it's very probably North America.
Yeah, North America, but good old North America, we've exported our poisonous ideas rapidly around the world. But luckily, they're particularly the UK is as bad as we are. Luckily, most of Europe has banned, among other things, glyphosate. There's still there are very few preservatives. A few books ago, I wrote, we were staying in Paris and we were going to catch a very early flight out the next morning. And we talked to the concierge that the night. And I said, well, maybe we could, we're leaving about 4 o'clock in the morning. Maybe we could have a couple of croissants, uh, you know, brought up to the room with a pot of coffee. And he was apoplectic. He said, "Oh, monsieur, I can't give you, day old croissants. Oh, it's like, I couldn't do that." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Well, of course, because there are no preservatives, oh, they'll be bad. Well, they would be bad. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's like you can tell what a real food is by the fact that it goes bad pretty fast.
yeah, we have a house here in Santa Barbara that we lost our house in one of the fires 7 years ago, and the house we bought came fully furnished, thank goodness. And in the kitchen, there were these big glass jars. One had Oreo cookies filled, and the other had pretzels filled. And we thought they were humorous, and we said, we're just going to leave them here. Well, we're now 7 years in, and those Oreo cookies and those pretzels are as pristine as they were 7 years ago. There's nothing growing on them. They're not shrinking. Now, if a mold won't even eat the dumb things, why would we want to put that in us? Yeah, 7 years now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not fermenting, are they?
No.
And it's funny because, we've been kind of a bit brainwashed, really, to believe that that's a good thing. That
Yeah.
if there's a long shelf life, that's actually a positive. Whereas that is like on the complete opposite end of the real food scale.
Absolutely. I mean, if this stuff, I mean, if a bacteria or a mold won't eat this stuff, um, in fact, I'll tell one more humorous story. There's a very large grain agricultural company in the United States called ConAgra, and ConAgra was originally started in Omaha, Nebraska. It was called Consolidated Mills, and my best friend in high school's father was the vice president of this company, and his mother made great chocolate chip cookies. And we would go over after school and eat raw cookie dough as she was making it. And one day he came home from work early and we're eating raw cookie dough. And he says, "Don't eat that stuff. It's full of bugs." And we're going, "What? I don't see any bugs." And he says, "Oh yeah, they're in there." And I'm going, "Yeah, but wait a minute, you don't see any bugs in flour." He says, "Yeah, they're actually there, but they can't grow uh, on the flour because there's nothing for them to eat." And we're going, "Wait a minute." And now I'm thinking, I should have listened to him too. If a bug can't grow eating refined white flour, what makes it think it's good for us?
Yeah.
And this was back in the 60s that he was telling us this.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny what we listen to and what we don't listen to. Yeah. And seeing as we're telling stories, I was giving an online workshop one time about fermented foods and drinks that I make and that I teach how to make. And I got heckled online on Zoom. Worst way to get heckled is in the chat on, on Zoom by someone who works for like health and safety, kind of, food, sanitary stuff, which, I respect in its own context, right? And he was like, you shouldn't be telling people to put stuff on the countertop to ferment. You're going to kill people. That's dangerous. And so, because I was talking about my milk kefir or kefir, however you pronounce it. So I said to him, "Well, do you know anything about lactofermentation? And, my yogurt is a viticulture, which is mesophilic, and it has to ferment at room temperature.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is dangerous." And he didn't even understand what I was asking him. Because I said to, and he said, like, he was like, "Well, you're an English teacher. You're not a health professional. You're not a nutritionist, you know?
I,
So this kind of stuff should be taught by a nutritionist." I said, "Well, you find me a nutritionist who knows about lactofermentation and mesophilic cultures, and I'll gladly have them teach it. But in the meantime, why isn't it taught by someone who actually knows a little bit about it,
yeah.
like me?" And so that was the end of his heckling. But it was like, you know, you te it feels like it's so unknown, the whole notion of fermenting foods that so many other cultures just take for granted.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things I mentioned in my current book, Gut Check, is that traditionally, traditional cultures save their meat by fermentation. And little did I realize that bacterial cultures are actually added to sausage mixture. And the bacteria actually eat the sugar molecules in these things. And there's actually huge amounts of benefits to it because some of the longest living people, in fact, the longest longevity lifespan of any country is a little country between Spain and France called Andorra up in the Pyrenees Mountains. And their life expectancy is about 90 years for both men and women, which is pretty darn good. And these guys basically eat kind of two things. They're sheep herders and goat herders, and they eat a lot of sheep and goat yogurt and kefirs and cheeses, and they eat a lot of sausages. And you go, wait a minute, the longest living people are eating, cheese and sausage. And it's like, that doesn't sound like that's going to work. But then when you look at it, these are fermented foods. And it's like, how'd they know this? And they did know this.
Yeah, well, the question is, how come we don't know it?
Exactly. Because we don't make our sausages that way. There are now becoming people that make sausage. Prosciutto, Parma ham, is actually fermented, and it turns out it's actually got live bacterial cultures. Now, go, oh my gosh, I can't eat bacteria. Well, yes, you can. You should.
Yeah.
They're good bacteria to eat, and a lot of the gut-brain paradox goes into the fact that there are really lots of important good bacteria that we should be eating all the time. And that just goes against Pasteur. Oh my gosh, you can't eat bacteria. They'll kill
Yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah,
you're
it
not
just depends
like
which
that.
type of bacteria. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of different types. So it seems a bit reductionist to say, oh, you can't eat any bacteria, for goodness sake. Yeah. And, I make my own kombucha and I have for the last 10 years or so. And I let it ferment for like over a month and a half, which, makes it pretty potent and pretty sour. Probably, I mean, I couldn't sell it because no one would buy it. No one would like it. And because they don't have my taste buds now that have got used to so much less sweet stuff, right? But I've seen the latest trend of store-bought kombuchas hit the market, right? Which I call glorified 7 Up, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're right. Our palates really are kind of bitter, sour avoidance. And yet, most of these long-lived cultures, actually, the bitter and sour is prized. And so, you're right. Most of the commercial kombuchas is it's just a soda pop. So much sugar is added, and because we don't like these bitter things. The same with yogurt.
Mm.
Yogurt. Most of the yogurt that people buy has lots of sugar in it to cover up that tartness because we don't like that, or we've been trained not to like it.
Well, this is it, right? And if you can train your taste buds not to like it, it stands to reason that you can train them to like all those other types of tastes apart
Yeah.
from just the sugary, the sweet tastes. And I know the people who do my program, they are absolutely gobsmacked that their whole taste range changes and their taste buds have been retrained. And I know I got to the point pretty early on in my sh no sugar journey where I just, I used to be the world's #1 sweet tooth. And now I just don't like sweet taste. It's not just like a moral thing of keeping away from it. I
The
just
same.
do not like it. It's weird because I don't know anyone else hardly who's like that. I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews. And when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar.
Yeah, well, and I've talked in my books, like, look, I want you to eat, if you're going to have dark chocolate, I want you to have really dark chocolate. Let's work our way up to 90% cacao. But if you just started eating 90% cacao, you go, so, let's start at 70%. And do that for a few weeks and you'll notice, oh my gosh, this is really sweet. And let's work our way up to 85 and so on.
Yeah.
And you're right, when somebody then gives you like some milk chocolate, personally, I go, this is really sweet. It's like,
Yeah,
so
not even pleasant anymore. So nothing to actually crave or hanker for.
right, right. You go, yeah. You
And
just
therein lies our power as consumers, at the very least, that if you don't actually like the taste of all these foods, then they have no power over you.
yeah. I'll mention, and my people tell me, don't tell this story, but I like it. Jack LaLanne was the godfather of fitness. Jack LaLanne lived into his mid 90s. Jack LaLanne used to have a saying, if it tastes good, spit it out. Now, people say, don't do that because, then they won't listen to you. I said, no, no, no. What he was actually saying is that we should actually not be eating for this 2 by 3 inch muscle, but we should be eating for our gut microbiome. And this was long before we knew all about them. And I think his point is well taken. We really should be eating for these 100 trillion bacteria that live in us. And like Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. And I paraphrase him to say that all disease can be reversed in the gut. So Jack LaLanne, eat for them and don't eat for this silly tongue, and we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, totally. Yes. And for the brain as well, because all this dopamine floods the brain and then we get hooked. We get addicted to these types of foods. Again, I don't even call them foods really. And it keeps us well away from the actual foods that not only feed our gut, but they also don't feed our cravings.
No, exactly. They again, this Chinese experiment really proved that if you give the gut bacteria, the good guys, what they need, they literally tell your brain that, hey, we got it, we're fine. Don't go looking for anything else. We're good. So,
Yeah, yeah. And as long
and
as we can,
that's where the power of this. So this is not. Everybody says, "Oh, I got to have such strong willpower." No, you got to have bacterial power, if you will, and they'll help you. They really do. It's amazing.
yeah, I love it. Bacterial power. I love it because I often talk about your personal power, which doesn't, I mean, willpower, I think, has been shown to work for about 15 minutes tops. Good luck
Yeah.
with that.
Well, and I go in several chapters on addictions and the the recidivism rate, the failure rate of like rehab programs is whether it's in alcohol, whether it's tobacco, whether it's drugs, it's about 90%. 90% of people fail because it's really working on willpower. And it turns out that in all of these addictions, there are bacteria that actually crave nicotine, that crave alcohol, that crave opioids. And they will actually get you to seek those products. They primarily use pain as the way to seek it. And there's some scary or uplifting studies that of how they hijack an addict's brain to get what they want. And the exciting thing is, if you get the good guys empowered, they'll actually push out the bad guys.
Yeah,
And it's like they'll take over the real estate. And that's what's really exciting. So
yeah.
I think we ought to have rehab centers where we teach people how to eat.
Well,
And
absolutely. I was just going to say, it's almost like we have to retrain the population to learn how to eat and how to recognize what food actually is and what it isn't.
yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, I do my bit with my program, but I mean, it's just me. And there are others in that field of sugar addiction and, kind of rehab for sugar. but it's not socially recognized or encouraged, not yet at least.
No. Yeah, I've had the glucose goddess on my podcast, I think a couple of times, and we get so much kind of hate mail after she says, "Oh my gosh, a fruit smoothie is just kind of mainlining sugar." And we get all this, hate that, or you're telling people, that fruit is bad for you, and guess what? Long ago, I mean, we sought out fruit because it was rare and it was a great source of calories, and we could store fructose as fat. And now we have 365 days of endless summer and endless fruit, and they've all been bred for sugar content. And we weren't designed for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? Most people imagine that a life where you don't eat all these refined sugar, flour products is going to be sad and dull and boring and like just not worth living. And my reality, at least, is the complete opposite. More energy, no more
Yeah.
cravings, great
Brain works
skin,
better.
the brain works better, your gut works better. It's all good. I can't find one negative thing in the last 10 years, for myself at least, in having cut sugar, flour, and sweeteners. Not one.
Yeah.
And adding the fermented foods and drinks, not only is it cheaper because I make them myself, but it's it's just part of what I eat now. It's not an extra, it's not something weird. It's just part of my diet.
One of the things I try to get people to realize is so vinegar is a fermented food. And I probably have, my wife and I have 10 vinegars in our pantry. And there's just so many ways to get just vinegar into your diet. Believe it or not, I am the first person to talk about the fake Coke, which is San Pellegrino sparkling water and balsamic vinegar. And I wrote about it years ago, did a YouTube on it, and when it became a TikTok thing, my people said, "Wait a minute, you invented that, and get back on YouTube and say it was mine." So, and it's an easy way to get fermented foods into you, or take a shot of apple cider vinegar.
Yeah,
That's an easy way to start.
yeah. Make your own kombucha. You let it ferment
Yeah,
long enough, it turns into vinegar anyway. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Totally, totally. And, and I think we're going to get hated on for quite a while yet until, like the tobacco industry or, our way of seeing cigarettes, until that also becomes normalized, that it won't be a no sugar diet anymore. It'll just be food.
Yeah. No, and there's just and the government is not going to help us with this. They should, but they won't because the elected representatives, these companies give these elected representatives lots of money to keep things the status quo.
Mm. Yeah, I hate to be, you know,
But you're right.
cynical.
It has to be, one person at a time, and and once people try this, and let's not mince words. It is difficult, but once people try this, it's amazing how much better people feel. When I wrote the Plant Paradox 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I say you're going to hate me for 6 weeks, and then you're really going to like me. And somebody wrote me recently, said, "You were exactly right. I hated you for 6 weeks, and now I love you." Yeah, because it's so hard to break this addiction.
It's hard. It's hard. You're right. And, in a lifetime, 6 weeks is such a temporary period. And for sugar, I found for me, it was 2 weeks, really hating myself, as it were. And then the rest of your life is so much better for so much longer. And yet
Yeah.
we're not willing to suffer for just a little bit, you know? But when is your book coming out?
It'll be April 15th.
Oh, the day after my birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
I'm going to get it for my birthday present then.
I think you'll enjoy it. It's amazing through the years to realize how much of our behavior is actually controlled by our microbiome. And the more it's like who's driving the bus? Well, the bus driver is actually being controlled by the passengers, and we need to get over it. Bacteria have been here for billions of years, and we've been here not very long, and they know what they're doing. In fact, we just happen to have we're their spaceship to get them to the next generation.
Love it.
So,
Love all these analogies. Totally. You're speaking to the English lit teacher here with your
there you go. That's right.
Wonderful. Well, I'll put the link to your book with this episode, as well as all your other books, because I've read several of them and they're great. Yeah. So thank you so much for taking
Well,
the
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Oh.
Ah, loved this conversation with Dr. Gundry. And yes, it's really, for most of us, not part of our culture, depending on where you come from, of course, to know about fermented foods and drinks, let alone to make them and to eat them and drink them as part of our everyday diet. And I use the word diet in the sense of things that we eat and not a way of losing weight. And I love what Dr. Gundry says about thinking about who you're feeding when you eat. Are you feeding your good bacteria or are you feeding your cravings? Because sugar feeds your bad bacteria that can cause your cravings. So basically, if you're not eating the foods or the products that are created and engineered by the processed foods industry to trigger your cravings, then chances are your good bacteria in your gut will get a chance to multiply and your cravings will diminish. Really? How do I know? Because it happened to me. And I know for a fact that I'm not the only one. So my advice to you, and very probably Dr. Gundry's advice, is give cutting sugar a try. What have you got to lose? But cutting down or cutting out sugar is much easier said than done. And in my experience, the most difficult step is the first step. And that's why I'm inviting you to take the cravings quiz. It's a 10-question quiz that I created especially to get you thinking a little deeper about your cravings. And whereas most quizzes give you generic feedback about your score, I'm offering you more specific feedback and practical tips to help you put theory into practice and take that first step to get rid of your cravings. So go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button, Do the Cravings Quiz. That's aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to start getting rid of cravings today. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.